Good morning, friends. I'm Simona Picchini. I'm a senior investigator and clinical pharmacologist at National Institute of Health, Rome, Italy. Today we will start a new interesting learning episode of Examination of Drugs, Part 11. We will speak about doping in different modules. Modules number 1, illicit use of drugs in sports. Module number 2, different classes of doping agents. Module number 3, World Anti-Doping Laboratories, how they work. Module number 4, sample collection. Module number 5, examination of doping drugs. Module number 6, famous cases of doping. Module number 7, conclusions. The illicit use of drugs in sport is commonly called doping, and we intend the use of banned drugs who can enhance physical performance before or during a competition. The word doping has different coming out. First, dope was an alcoholic substance used in the 18th century in southern Africa to enhance the strength of people. But dope was also a mixture of opium and tobacco used at the end of 19th century in United States of America by bodylifters. The phenomenon of doping started from ancient times. Also, when the Olympics were in Greek or in the ancient Rome, athletes were treated to enhance their performance in sport. For example, it was told that the Greek athletes were treated with the meat of bulls to have more strength during their competitions. And also, herbal infusion were prepared to be given to athletes, for example, during the chariot championships in ancient Rome, to give more strength to athletes. At that time, and also nowadays, not only human beings were treated to enhance their physical performance, but also animals. Horses from the Rome ancient chariots were also treated with herbal infusions to enhance their running force. And also today, during horse race, some horses are treated with hormones and other stuff to have more running force. In fact, the banning of doping, it is not only for human beings, but also for animals. And doping agents are not only investigated in human beings, but also in animals. Then, the use of steroids dates back to the first years of 20th century, when it was discovered that Russian bodylifters were using steroids to have more strength in their competition. So US copied this doping measure and pushed a pharmaceutical company, the Cyba, to produce oral steroid, which started to be used by the American athletes. Then, for the first time at the Olympics of 1960, a Danish cyclist immediately died during a competition, and in the autopsies, amphetamines and other substances were found. Each year, World Anti-Doping Agency creates a new list of substances banned for all the competition and substances banned only in competition, and other substances banned only in some specific sports. The list of banned substances was first released in 1963 by the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. But in 2002, when the International Olympic Committee was substituted by the World Anti-Doping Agency, this latter agency started to release the new list of substances. Let's see how this list is formed. Speaking about substance banned out and in competition, I mean substances always banned for elite athletes, we found number 1, androgenic anabolic steroids. Both the exogenous steroids, synthetic molecules, and also all the endogenous steroids, which are exogenously administered. In number 2, we find peptide hormones, growth factor and related substances, and mimetics. One important substance of this class is erythropoietin, which alters the content of oxygen in the blood and permits a higher oxygenation of blood. But we also find growth hormone, which is administered for turnover of bones and muscles, even if all these effects have been never systematically proved in clinical studies. So sometimes substances are used, but their effect is more legendary than truth. Number 3, beta-2 agonists. These substances given in very high concentration, we would say concentration overcoming the therapeutic range, are anabolic. They have an anabolic function. One of them, for example, is clenbuterol. Number 4, hormone and metabolic modulators, stimulators of metabolism. Number 5, diuretics and masking agents. These agents are only used with the aim of masking the presence of other substances inside the urine, which is analyzed to discover the eventual presence of a doping agent. Diuretics are also used to lose weight for those sports in which weight categories is considered. And so when an athlete overcomes with his weight a certain category, he can use diuretic agents to lose water and weight. After those classes, we have the prohibited methods. The first one is manipulation of blood and blood component. Any methods then can change the composition of blood, for example, autologous or heterologous blood transfusion. This is mostly used by cyclists to increase the oxygenation of their blood. There is also another method, which is the hypoxia, to live at very high altitudes or in hyperbaric tents to artificially create hypoxia and increasing the oxygenation of the blood. The second prohibited method is chemical and physical manipulation of blood. And the third is gene doping. In this concern, we have to say that we are not probably so near to perform gene doping at this stage. I mean, changing the genes, the genome of a person to transform his or her body. In any case, gene doping has been introduced in this prohibited list. Then we have all the classes of substances which are banned just in competition. I mean, this can be used out of competition, but we will see that sometimes this cannot be performed. Number ones are the class of stimulants, such as, for example, amphetamines, but also ephedrine and other stimulants, cocaine. The second class are narcotics, for example, opiates or opioids. The third class are cannabinoids. With respect to these classes, they are more drugs of abuse than doping agents. But so we ask ourselves why these substances are included in a list of prohibited substances. Cannabinoids do not affect physical performance in competition, nor narcotic. Once one of the directors of International Olympic Committee, Dr. Jordi Segura, said to me, "Every substance which is in the list of prohibited substance is an anti-doping agent, no discussion." And finally, glucocorticoids, like for example cortisone, because they decrease inflammation, and so they avoid to feel the pain, and so the athlete can compete more if they don't feel a pain. Then we found some substances used and banned in some specific sports. For example, alcohol, which is banned in cars competitions, for example, Formula 1, and also in hair sports. And then we have beta blockers banned in competitions such as archery, darts, shooting, because these substances block the trembling of the hands and say they enhance the performance during this kind of competitions. World Anti-Doping Laboratories, how they work. There are 34 established anti-doping laboratories all over the world. Many of them exist from a long time, many others were developed in recent times. So the former ones were firstly approved by the International Olympic Committee, but since the creation of World Anti-Doping Agency, these laboratories are accredited by this agency. They are usually governmental laboratories. Sometimes they are university laboratories, and in very few cases they are private laboratories. To become an anti-doping laboratory, you have to encompass a governmental decision and then ask for an accreditation to World Anti-Doping Agency. The first action to be an accredited laboratory is the visit of inspectors from World Anti-Doping Agency. They have to check if all the prerequisites of the laboratory are approved to then pass to the second step. The second step is the analysis of unknown samples which contain doping agents. And the World Anti-Doping Agency verify if the laboratory is able to detect those substances in different samples and also to detect blank samples with no anti-doping agency. So, no false negative results, but no false positive results. I have to say the World Anti-Doping Laboratories, they usually perform just urine analysis because the biological matrix used in anti-doping analysis is, in more than 90% of cases, urine. The urine is the biological matrix of election for doping controls because the collection of this biological matrix does not offend the privacy of the individual. But in some particular cases, like for example cyclism, the International Organization of Cyclists approved also blood examination. In recent time, the biological passport of athletes has been established. This is another type of control because usually anti-doping laboratories just analyze the presence of the substances listed in the list of prohibited substances, which are more than 200, but no more. Conversely, in the biological passports, longitudinally, an athlete is examined for the blood content of established parameters, like, for example, red cells count, young red cells, reticulocytes, levels of cholesterol and proteins associated with cholesterol, some hormones, and so on, is another form of anti-doping controls which started just in recent years. No other biological matrices are studied for the moment, even if some cases of doping have been also resolved in courts by hair analysis to demonstrate that the athlete was not a consumer or chronic consumer of a certain substance. Whatever we speak about an Olympic competition or an international competition or a national competition, the sample collection is always the same. First, in Olympic competitions, the athletes obtaining the medals are always checked for the presence of doping agents. In international competitions, the committee can decide which athlete will pass a doping examination, and so is in national competitions. They can be extracted by chance, or they can be just the first, second, and third winner of a competition. Once the committee decides which athlete will undergo doping control, as I said, in case of Olympics, the medalists, once the athlete has been notified to undergo a doping control, he or she is accompanied to the room for the doping control. In this room, only the doctor collecting the samples, eventual inspector, and one representative of the athlete can be present, no more person. The athlete is accompanied to a toilet and urine is collected in front of the doctor. So eventual manipulation of this biological matrix by the athlete is avoided because he is under visual control of the doctor. A minimum of 100 milliliters urine has to be collected. If the urine cannot be collected in one time, we do what is called partial collection. The partial urine is closed hermetically and the athlete is stopped until a second collection is done and the total volume is complete. This operation can be repeated 2, 4, or 5 times until the total volume is reached. At that point, the athlete who has signed a form with all the information, the date of birth, the name of the athlete, his address, if he had taken some drugs or pharmaceutical in the week preceding the control, the urine sample is passed to two hermetical glass containers, number A and number B. Why two? Because one will undergo to the doping control, but the second will be maintained in a closed fridge. Because in case of positivity, which in doping control is called non-negativity, the athlete can refuse the result of this analysis and can ask the sample B to be analyzed in front of him of one of his representatives. So, two samples are collected. Clearly, sample A is of more volume of urine, while sample B is less, because in case of repetition of the analysis, only the positive class of the positive substance detected in the lab will be re-examined, and no other substances. Once the glass containers are filled, they are closed hermetically, and it is not possible to open them until they reach the anti-doping laboratory, where a particular machine can open these glass containers. The glass containers are closed in a plastic bag, and the plastic bag is included in a polyexpand bag, which is then closed in another bag. The bag is immediately sent by courier to the anti-doping lab. In case of erythropoietin control, the two glass containers have to be put in ice and immediately sent within 24 hours to the anti-doping lab. At the end, a form is written in 4 parts. One part is given to the athlete. One part is given to anti-doping laboratory, but this part is anonymous. Only the code of the sample is reported. So the name of the athlete is unknown. While for the form sent to the federation, the name of the athlete and the code are present, so that in case of non-negative result, the sport federation can couple a code with the name of the athlete. The 4th part of the form is eventually given to a governmental institution in case of doping controls demanded by governmental institution, as in case of Italy, where doping is a penal fault, and so the Ministry of Health is organizing doping controls together with the sports federations. As I told you, once the glass containers reach the anti-doping laboratory, they are opened and the form with the code of the athlete is registered and coupled to these 2 glass containers. One container is immediately sent to a closed, controlled fridge at minus 20 degrees centigrade, where the sample will be maintained at least for 1 year. The sample A is opened and the urine content is divided in many tubes. Each tube will undergo an extraction process and a treatment process of the samples for certain classes of analytes. Usually, in the anti-doping laboratories, they perform 6 different analyses for different classes of substances. Then there is a specific analysis just for erythropoietin and other products. Urine samples are extracted with different methods for different class of substances, for example, stimulants, narcotics, corticosteroids. Only medical, legal, confirmatory analyses are performed in anti-doping laboratory. Due to the special type of analysis these laboratories perform, they are so delicate and they have to be an absolute proof or absence of a substance or presence of a substance, then the method cannot fail. And so it has to be completely checked from the beginning to the end. When the urine sample belonging to a certain athlete is analyzed for all the class of different substances, a final report is produced. In case of negativity, no doping agent is found in the urine sample, the form will report negative result. In case of non-negative results, because one or more substances have been found, the substances are reported in the form if they are above a certain threshold for all the substances for which World Anti-Doping Agency established a threshold of concentration. But in many cases, there is a zero threshold. This means that the only presence of the substance is a non-negative result. At that point, WADA is informed by these non-negative results. The Sports Federation is also informed, and the Sports Federation informed the athlete. At this point, the athlete can accept the results on non-positive analysis or can refuse. And as I told you before, the athlete can go alone or together with its representatives, or just the lawyer and the representative of athletes can go to the anti-doping lab and repeat the analysis. Always the same anti-doping lab has to repeat the analysis. The athlete cannot choose another anti-doping lab, but the athlete can be present during the whole analysis process. Just few words regarding the most famous cases in recent times. It has been known very well that many athletes for the Eastern Germany have been treated for years with hormones to acquire strength. The most famous case was that of Andreas Krieger, who competed for shot put throw in 1986. She was treated with high doses of testosterone. Then at the end, she decided to become a man. He is now 45 years old, and he is a man. He has to change his sex because he was so treated with so many masculine hormones that at the end, her female appearance completely disappeared. But there was also the case of the famous soccer player Diego Armando Maradona, who was found positive to cocaine in 1991 and found positive to ephedrine in 1994, and so he could not participate to the World Championship. In 1988, Ben Johnson, a Canadian runner, was found positive to steroid nandrolone, and the gold medal was retired. The athlete who arrived for second was at that time Carl Lewis, and so the gold medal was given to Carl Lewis. But then it was discovered that also Carl Lewis has been used anabolic steroids. So also the gold medal was retired. The last important famous case was the one of 2012, Lance Armstrong, a cyclist. He won 7 consecutive Tours de France. He was an hero because he fought against cancer, but then it was discovered that he was using erythropoietins for years and years. In this episode, we spoke about doping, the use of prohibited substances in sports. The phenomenon of doping is changing its shape because it is going from elite athletes who compete in international competitions to recreational athletes who compete by themselves or with the friends.